My name is Mariana, I'm 27, and I've always been labeled as the family disappointment. The weight of those words followed me everywhere, but nothing cut deeper than that winter evening when everything changed. My mother and I stood in our kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd once taught me to bake cookies and braid my hair. But those memories felt like they belonged to someone else's life. "You will always be a burden," she said, her voice sharp and certain, eyes fixed on mine without a flicker of doubt. Not sometimes difficult or currently struggling, but always, forever, a permanent weight on everyone around me. I felt my entire world collapse in that moment. The air left my lungs. The ground beneath me seemed to dissolve. And in that crushing silence that followed, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life. What no one knew, not my high-achieving siblings, not my perfectionist father, and especially not my mother, was that I had been hiding something, a secret that grew in the shadows of their disappointment, a truth that would eventually force everyone, especially the woman who gave me life, to see me for who I truly was, the shadow of expectations. Growing up as the middle child between two brilliant siblings was like living in perpetual eclipse. My older brother, Daniel, was the academic prodigy, valedictorian, full scholarship to Princeton, the kind of son whose achievements my mother framed and displayed on every available wall. My younger sister, Sophia, was the artistic genius. Her paintings hung in local galleries by age 16, her piano recitals drawing tears from strangers. And then there was me, Mariana, the one whose report cards were met with tight-lipped smiles and questions about applying yourself more, the one whose participation trophies were tucked away in drawers, while championships and distinctions occupied the family shrine of success. "Your siblings know what it means to make something of themselves," my mother would say. Her voice dipped in that particular blend of disappointment and judgment she reserved just for me. It wasn't that I failed. I was average. And in our household, average was failure. My mother, Elena, had built her identity around perfection. Our home was immaculate, her appearance flawless. Her children, well, 2 of them, were extensions of her relentless drive for excellence. She'd been raised by immigrant parents who sacrificed everything, and mediocrity was a luxury she refused to indulge. Every morning, I'd watch her apply her makeup with surgical precision, each brushstroke a reminder of the standards I could never seem to reach. The comment, the one that would haunt me for years, came after my college rejection letter arrived. I'd applied to my mother's alma mater, desperate for that approving smile I'd spent a lifetime chasing. The envelope was thin, and we both knew what that meant before I even opened it. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the rejection letter trembling in my hands. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she methodically folded the dish towel she was holding, placed it on the counter, and turned to face me. Her expression wasn't angry. It was worse. It was resigned. "Your father and I have discussed this," she said, as if my rejection had been anticipated, planned for. "We'll support you for 1 more year, but then you need to figure something out. We can't keep carrying you while you find yourself." I nodded, numb but not surprised. "I just worry," she continued, her voice softening in a way that only twisted the knife deeper, "that you will always be a burden. To us, to yourself, to anyone who cares about you." The words landed like a verdict. Not a temporary state, but a permanent identity. Burden. In that moment, something crystallized inside me. Not determination, not yet. First came shame, bone deep and complete. I became what she named me. The family burden, the disappointment, the weight everyone carried. That night, alone in my room, I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized myself. I was becoming invisible, fading into the background of my own life. But deep inside, beneath the layers of inadequacy, something else stirred. A small, defiant voice whispering that perhaps my story wasn't finished being written, living under the label. The year after my rejection became a blur of small humiliations. I took a job at a local coffee shop. Nothing impressive, just enough to prove I wasn't completely useless. Every morning I'd serve lattes to former classmates who were home on break from prestigious universities, their futures stretching out before them like golden roads, while mine seemed to end at the tip of an espresso machine. "It's temporary," I'd say when they asked about my plans, the lie sitting bitter on my tongue. The truth was, I had no plans. When you've spent your life being told you're not enough, you start to believe your only purpose is to take up less space. At family dinners, I became expert at deflection. "How's work, Mariana?" my father would ask, his tone carefully neutral, as if discussing a terminal illness. I'd mutter something about good tips or regular customers before quickly turning the conversation to Daniel's research fellowship or Sophia's upcoming exhibition. My mother would smile gratefully at the change of subject, relieved to be back in familiar territory. Success. I tried. God knows I tried. I enrolled in community college courses my parents didn't know about, using tips saved from extra shifts. Business administration. Practical, sensible. Something that might finally earn a nod of approval. But halfway through the semester, staring at accounting principles that made my mind go numb, I realized I was still living for her validation, still trying to escape a label by transforming into someone I wasn't. The worst part wasn't the disappointment in their eyes. It was starting to see it reflected in my own. Then came the day that changed everything, though I didn't recognize its significance at the time. A customer left behind a worn leather notebook at the coffee shop. Inside were sketches, not polished art like my sister's, but raw, visceral designs for clothing I'd never seen before. Experimental silhouettes, fabric combinations that shouldn't work but somehow did. I was transfixed. "You like fashion?" The voice startled me. The notebook's owner had returned. Elaine, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that seemed to see straight through pretense. I don't know anything about it," I admitted, embarrassed to be caught snooping. She studied me for a moment. "But you responded to it. That's not nothing." Something in her assessment felt different than my mother's. There was no measurement against an impossible standard, just observation. Elaine, I would learn, taught at the Design Institute downtown. She became a regular, always sketching while she drank her Americano. Sometimes she'd ask my opinion on a design, genuinely curious about my untrained eye. "Fresh perspective," she called it, though we both knew she was being kind. One afternoon, after a particularly brutal family dinner where my mother had suggested career counseling like one might suggest rehab, I found myself confessing to Elaine. "My family thinks I'm a disappointment," I said, the words escaping before I could catch them. She closed her sketchbook. "And what do you think?" No one had ever asked me that before. That night, I couldn't sleep. Elaine's question circled in my mind. What did I think? Who was I when I wasn't being measured against others? I pulled out some old magazines, scissors, and on a whim, began cutting and assembling. Not fashion exactly, but collage. Visual stories pieced together from fragments. By morning, my floor was covered with them, each one expressing something I'd never found words for. It was terrible, amateur work. But for the first time in years, I felt something stirring within me. A quiet voice saying maybe, just maybe, I had something to say after all. I hid the collages under my bed when I heard my mother's footsteps in the hallway. This fragile new feeling was too precious to expose to her judgment. But later that week, I found myself in a craft store, buying proper supplies with coffee shop tips. Then at the library, checking out books on textile design and visual storytelling. My secret wasn't grand or impressive. It wasn't going to immediately prove my mother wrong. But in those stolen hours, late nights after shifts, early mornings before the house woke, I began to find something I'd never expected. My own voice. The secret journey. 2 worlds. That's what my life became. By day, I was still Mariana the barista. Mariana the disappointment, dutifully playing my assigned role in the family narrative. But by night, hunched over a small desk squeezed into the corner of my bedroom, I was becoming someone else entirely. The first few months were purely experimental. I'd stay up until 3 a.m, fingers stained with fabric dye, trying techniques from YouTube tutorials played at low volume so my family wouldn't hear. Most attempts ended in frustration, uneven stitches, colors that muddied together, designs that looked nothing like the visions in my head. "This is why you're a burden," that internal voice would whisper, sounding suspiciously like my mother. You can't even do this right. But something had shifted inside me. The hunger to create was stronger than the fear of failure. So I kept going, hiding evidence of my late nights, concealing fabric scraps in plastic bags at the bottom of my trash can, washing dye from under my fingernails before breakfast, inventing excuses for my exhaustion. You look terrible, my mother remarked one morning, eyeing the dark circles under my eyes. Are you staying up watching television again? This is why you can't move forward, Mariana. No discipline. I nodded, accepting the criticism while secretly guarding my truth. Let her think I was wasting time. Better that than exposing my nascent passion to her judgment before it had a chance to grow. 6 months in, Elaine noticed the calluses on my hands, the needle pricks on my fingers. You're making something, she said. Not a question. That afternoon, heart pounding, I brought one of my pieces to the coffee shop, a reconstructed jacket I'd salvaged from a thrift store and transformed with embroidered storytelling panels down the sleeves. It was deeply personal, each panel representing a moment when I'd felt invisible in my own family. Abstract enough that no one else would understand its meaning, but honest in a way I'd never allowed myself to be. Elaine studied it silently, her fingers tracing the stitches. The moment stretched so long I began mentally rehearsing how I'd laugh it off when she told me to stick to serving coffee. You have something here, she finally said. Raw, unpolished, but authentic. Who's teaching you? YouTube, I admitted. And library books. She raised an eyebrow. Bring me something new next week. That began my real education. Elaine would review my work during her coffee breaks, offering technical advice, lending me books from her personal collection, occasionally slipping me fabric samples from the Design Institute. These were going to be thrown out, she'd say, though we both suspected that wasn't always true. I began saving every penny from my tips, no longer for business courses I didn't want, but for proper supplies. My bedroom slowly transformed, plastic bins of fabric tucked under the bed, a small sewing machine I found at a garage sale hidden in my closet, sketches taped to the inside of my wardrobe doors where my mother wouldn't see during her cleaning sweeps. There were setbacks, of course. The night my sister burst into my room without knocking, and I barely managed to shove a half-finished piece under my blanket. The time my mother found thread snippings in the hallway and lectured me about household cleanliness. The constant fear of discovery before I was ready, before I had something substantial enough to withstand their scrutiny. But there were victories, too. The first time I completed a piece exactly as I'd envisioned it, a vest with interchangeable panels that told different stories depending on how they were arranged. The morning I worked up the courage to wear one of my subtler creations to the coffee shop, and a customer asked where I'd bought it. The day Elaine introduced me to a former student who now managed a small gallery that sometimes featured textile art. You should submit something, the former student suggested. I laughed it off, but the seed was planted. One night, staring at my growing collection of work hidden around my bedroom, a realization struck me with unexpected force. The very thing my mother had named me, burden, had become the fuel for something meaningful. Each stitch was an act of defiance against that label. Each piece I created was proof that her definition of me was incomplete. I'd been carrying her words like a stone around my neck for so long. But now, in the quiet hours when everyone else was asleep, I was learning to transform that weight into wings. The breaking point. My brother Daniel's 30th birthday became the flashpoint. My mother spent weeks planning the perfect celebration. Not just a party, but a testament to his achievements. The dining room transformed into a shrine of his success. Princeton pennants, framed academic papers, photos of Daniel shaking hands with renowned professors. Family only, my mother insisted, though family somehow included university colleagues and neighborhood friends who might witness Daniel's glory. For 3 weeks, our house buzzed with her meticulous preparations, each one a reminder of what celebration-worthy achievement looked like. I had been working on something special, a tailored jacket for Daniel, with subtle design elements referencing inside jokes from our childhood, before achievement gaps widened into chasms between us. I'd poured hundreds of hours into it, my most technically ambitious piece yet. Not that anyone knew. As far as my family was concerned, I'd simply bought my brother a gift with coffee shop money. The evening arrived, our house filled with the scent of my mother's signature dishes and the sound of congratulatory conversations. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, serving drinks, clearing plates, playing my supporting role in the production of Daniel's success story. "Mariana," my mother called across the room, "bring out the special glasses for the toast." As I headed to the kitchen, I overheard her talking to her friend Charlotte, their voices lowered but not enough. "And how is Mariana doing?" Charlotte asked. My mother sighed. That particular sigh I'd grown to recognize, equal parts resignation and martyrdom. Still at the coffee shop, we've accepted that she's just different from the others. Not everyone can be exceptional, I suppose. At least she's independent, Charlotte offered charitably. My mother's laugh held no humor. Hardly. We still supplement her rent. Between you and me, I don't know if she'll ever fully stand on her own. Some children just remain burdens longer than others. The special glasses nearly slipped from my hands. Nothing she said was new. I'd heard variations of it for years. But something about hearing her casually discuss my inadequacy at what was supposed to be a family celebration broke something loose inside me. The weight I'd carried for so long suddenly felt unbearable. I managed to deliver the glasses, my face a careful mask, then slipped away to the bathroom where I pressed my forehead against the cool mirror and tried to breathe. In the reflection, I barely recognized myself. This faded, diminished version of who I could be. The gift exchange came after dinner. Sophia's artfully wrapped package revealed a custom-painted set of cufflinks. My father presented an expensive watch. My mother saved her gift for last, a first-edition book by Daniel's academic hero, procured through connections and persistence. Then came my turn. The jacket, wrapped in simple paper, suddenly seemed pathetic. What had I been thinking? This wasn't going to change anything. I almost didn't hand it over, but Daniel was watching expectantly. He unwrapped it carefully, held up the jacket with a puzzled expression. It didn't come in a designer box. It didn't have a recognizable label. It was just different. "Did you pick this up at that vintage store downtown?" he asked kindly. Before I could answer, my mother interjected. "It's the thought that counts," she said, already reaching for the jacket to fold it away, already moving on to serve dessert. I made it. The words left my mouth before I could stop them, hanging in the sudden silence of the dining room. "You what?" My mother's hands froze on the fabric. "I made it," I repeated, stronger this time. "I designed it. I sewed it. Those patterns on the cuffs are from that summer at Lake George when Daniel taught me to skip stones." My brother looked at the jacket with new eyes, turning over the cuff to examine the embroidered pattern. "You made this? When did you learn to do this?" My mother's laugh cut through the moment. "Mariana, don't be ridiculous. This is clearly store-bought." Something snapped inside me. "Look at the inside collar," I told Daniel, ignoring her. "My signature is stitched there." He found it, the small embroidered M hidden in the collar design. The room went quiet again, but differently this time. I could feel my heart pounding in my throat. "Well," my mother finally said, her voice tight, "it's a lovely hobby. Now who wants coffee with dessert?" A hobby, like her weekend gardening, like my father's casual golf. Something inconsequential, unworthy of disrupting the narrative of who I was supposed to be. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "It's not a hobby." My voice didn't sound like my own. It was steadier, clearer than I'd ever allowed it to be in this house. "Mariana, not now," my father warned, glancing nervously at the guests. But the dam had broken. 2 years of secret work, of hidden passion, of finding myself in the shadows of their disappointment. All of it surged forward. I couldn't stop it if I tried. "I need to show you something," I said. "All of you." The revelation. The procession to my bedroom felt surreal. My entire family and several guests following me up the stairs, curious and uncomfortable in equal measure. My mother whispered urgent pleas to stop making a scene, while my father tried to distract guests with offers of more wine. But Daniel, jacket still in his hands, kept pace directly behind me, his expression unreadable but attentive. My hand trembled slightly as I opened my bedroom door. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't rushing to hide my work, wasn't scrambling to maintain the fiction of the daughter they thought they knew. Instead, I walked to my closet and began pulling out plastic bins, opening drawers, revealing the secret archive of my transformation. What is all this? My mother's voice had that dangerous calm that always preceded her most cutting disappointments. Wordlessly, I began laying pieces across my bed. The experimental early works, the increasingly refined garments, the technical sketches and material studies. 2 years of late nights and early mornings, of stolen moments and determined persistence. 2 years of becoming someone while being seen as no one. I've been designing and creating for almost 2 years now, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. This isn't just a jacket I made for Daniel. This is what I do, who I am. The silence in the room felt physical, pressing against my skin as my family tried to reconcile the evidence before them with the daughter they thought they knew. Sophia moved forward first, picking up a draped dress with structural elements that seemed to defy gravity. "Mariana, this is extraordinary," she said quietly, her artist's eye recognizing the technical skill even if the medium wasn't her own. My father stood frozen in the doorway, his expression cycling through confusion, surprise, and something that might have been reassessment. A few guests murmured appreciatively, examining pieces with genuine interest. Only my mother remained unmoved, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. "And you've been doing this hobby instead of focusing on building a real career?" The familiar dismissal stung, but differently now. I wasn't alone with it anymore. My work was visible, undeniable. "It's not a hobby," I repeated. 3 of my pieces were accepted into the Emerging Design Showcase at the Westfield Gallery last month. This was the secret I'd been holding closest. Not just that I created, but that my creation had already begun to find recognition beyond my bedroom walls. The acceptance letter had arrived 2 weeks ago, Elaine's gallery contact having submitted my work without telling me until it was selected. The Westfield? Sophia's eyes widened. That's a serious venue. My mother's expression flickered, the first crack in her certainty. "You're exhibiting at the Westfield? Why wouldn't you tell us something like that?" The question held such unconscious irony that a small, unexpected laugh escaped me. "Because you've spent years telling me I'll always be a burden. Why would I risk the one thing that makes me feel like I'm not under your judgment before I knew it could withstand it?" I crossed to my desk and pulled out the acceptance letter, handing it to her without further explanation. As she read, I turned to the rest of my audience, finding my voice growing stronger with each word. "I'm not Daniel or Sophia. I won't have their kind of success, and I finally realized I don't want it. What looks like achievement to you might look like a prison to me." I gestured around the room at my collection. This is where I found myself. Not in spite of feeling like a burden, but because of it. I picked up one of my earliest pieces, a rough, emotion-driven experiment in textile deconstruction and rebuilding. Every time I felt invisible in this family, every time I was measured and found wanting, I put that feeling into creating something new. I transformed it. My mother looked up from the letter, her face pale. "The curator calls your work revolutionary and viscerally honest," she read, her voice faint with disbelief. "The irony," I continued, addressing her directly now, "is that when you called me a burden, you gave me the greatest gift possible. You freed me from trying to be like you. You pushed me to find value in myself when I couldn't find it in your approval." The room had gone completely still, the air heavy with rearranged truths. My mother's carefully constructed narrative of our family, brilliant Daniel, gifted Sophia, disappointing Mariana, lay in pieces around us, as deconstructed as some of my earliest textile experiments. "Why didn't you tell us?" My father's voice was soft, tinged with something that might have been regret. "Because I needed to believe in myself first," I answered simply. "I needed to know that even if you all still saw me as a burden after seeing my work, it wouldn't destroy me. I needed to be strong enough to stand in my truth, regardless of your reaction." Daniel stepped forward then, still holding the jacket I'd made him. He examined it with new understanding, tracing the subtle storytelling elements with his finger. We've been missing who you are for a long time, haven't we? The question hung in the air, not accusatory but honest in a way our family rarely managed. Behind him, my mother stood perfectly still, the acceptance letter trembling slightly in her hand, her carefully applied makeup unable to conceal the shock in her eyes. For the first time in my memory, she looked at me, really looked at me, as if seeing someone she'd never met before. The transformation. The days following what my family now awkwardly refers to as the revelation unfolded in a series of aftershocks. My bedroom remained exactly as I'd left it that night. Work displayed across every surface, my secret self fully exposed. I made no move to hide it again, and no one asked me to. The morning after Daniel's birthday, I came downstairs expecting tension, perhaps even renewed conflict. Instead, I found my mother sitting alone at the kitchen table, a cup of untouched coffee in front of her, looking somehow smaller than I'd ever seen her. "I couldn't sleep," she said without preamble. "I kept seeing your work, trying to understand how—" She trailed off, then looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. How did I miss this? How did I not see what was happening in my own house, with my own daughter? It wasn't quite an apology, but it was the first time she'd ever acknowledged a failure of perception rather than a failure on my part. "You saw what you expected to see," I answered, not unkindly. "We all do." She nodded slowly, turning her coffee cup in small circles. "I'd like to come to your exhibition, if that's all right." The Westfield showing became a strange turning point. My mother arrived dressed as if for one of Sophia's gallery openings, her armor of perfection firmly in place. But I watched as she listened to others discuss my work. Curators, other artists, complete strangers who had no idea of our complicated history. I saw her expression shift from defensive politeness to genuine surprise as my pieces received serious critical attention. "Your daughter's perspective is fascinatingly unique," I overheard the curator telling her. "This deconstructed approach to traditional forms. It's as if she's rebuilding the very concept of structure from the ground up." My mother glanced at me across the room, something uncertain flickering across her face. "Yes," she said after a pause. She's always had her own way of seeing things. It was such a small acknowledgement, but from her, it felt seismic. The real change came gradually, in 1,000 tiny recalibrations. My father began asking questions about my process, genuinely curious rather than performatively supportive. Sophia and I started having actual conversations about creative challenges, finding unexpected common ground despite our different mediums. Even Daniel called regularly from his research position abroad, sending links to textile exhibitions he thought might interest me. My mother's transformation was the most complex. There were still moments of regression, comments about financial stability and long-term security that revealed her lingering fears. But there were also new efforts. She cleaned out her craft room, offering it to me as a proper workspace. She awkwardly mentioned my upcoming exhibition to her friends, testing out this new narrative of her middle child. 3 months after the revelation, she knocked on my studio door, holding a faded cardboard box I'd never seen before. "These were my mother's," she said, setting it down carefully. Inside were exquisite hand-embroidered linens and intricate lacework. She wanted to be a seamstress, but my father insisted it wasn't a proper career. She only did it at home, secretly. Her voice caught slightly. I never made the connection until now. We looked at each other across a bridge of understanding neither of us had been able to see before. "I was trying to protect you," she admitted quietly. "From struggle, from rejection, from a world that doesn't always reward creativity the way it rewards pragmatism." "I know," I said, because I did. Her methods had been wrong, her words devastating, but her fear for me had been real. "I'm still learning how to see you," she confessed. "The real you, not the daughter I imagined." It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Some wounds were too deep for simple healing. The words, "You'll always be a burden," would never completely fade from my memory. But something had fundamentally shifted in our relationship. We were both seeing each other more clearly, more honestly than before. My career progression surprised everyone, myself included. A small feature in a design magazine led to an apprenticeship with an established designer who appreciated my unconventional approach. My Instagram following grew steadily as I documented my creative process. I moved into my own apartment, supporting myself through a combination of commissioned pieces and part-time teaching at a community arts program. The final piece of transformation came unexpectedly, almost a year after that fateful birthday party. I was preparing for my first solo exhibition, a collection exploring themes of visibility, expectation, and rebirth. The centerpiece was a dramatic, reconstructed gown built from fragments of discarded fabrics, each piece meticulously transformed from something abandoned into something essential. My mother came to see it before the opening, standing before the piece in long silence. "This is how you felt, isn't it?" she finally asked. "Pieced together from all the parts of yourself we discarded or ignored." I nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in my throat. She reached out, her fingers hovering just above the intricate stitching without touching it. "It's beautiful," she said, "and so much stronger than if it had been made from perfect, unmarked cloth." In that moment, standing beside the physical manifestation of my journey, I realized something profound. The burden I had carried for so long had been transformed, not erased, not forgotten, but reconstituted into the foundation of my strength. My mother's words had shaped me, not in the way she intended, but in a way that ultimately led me to myself. What my mother saw as my greatest burden turned out to be my greatest gift. The day she looked me in the eyes and named me a weight to be carried became the day I began searching for my own definition of value. I sometimes wonder who I might have become without that moment of cruel clarity, if I would have found my voice through gentler revelations, or if I needed that particular pain to break free from the narrow path I'd been trying to walk. I can't know for certain. Our wounds and our gifts are often so tightly interwoven that separating them becomes impossible. What I do know is this: I am no longer invisible, not to my family, not to the world, and most importantly, not to myself. The same hands that once trembled while hiding fabric scraps now confidently create pieces that speak my truth. The same voice that once whispered apologies for existing now teaches others to find their own creative language. My relationship with my mother continues to evolve. Imperfect, sometimes fragile, but honest in a way it never was before. We are learning to see each other as complex, whole people rather than reflections of our expectations or disappointments. Some days are easier than others. Healing is rarely linear. The greatest transformation wasn't in my career success or my family's newfound respect. It was in realizing that the opinion that truly matters is my own, that I am the one who gets to decide my worth, my purpose, my place in the world. No one can name me a burden if I don't accept that label. Sometimes people meet me now and say they envy my confidence, my clear sense of direction. They don't see the years of invisibility that preceded it, the painful metamorphosis required to emerge as myself. They don't know that sometimes strength isn't born from encouragement, but from its absence, from the determined choice to believe in yourself when no one else does. My name is Mariana. I'm 27 years old, and I am not a burden. I am a builder, a creator, a transformer of what was broken into what is beautiful. Sometimes the people who should believe in us the most become the reason we learn to believe in ourselves. And in that painful paradox lies a truth worth remembering. What others see as your greatest weakness may, in the end, become your most powerful gift.